Mention League One to most football fans around Europe, and it will instantly conjure up images of that fearsome PSG front three of Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe. But dig a little deeper, and one of the more romantic stories of this generation is currently in full swing, in a little-known village in France's northeastern region, which goes by the name of Reims. So, stay with us to hear all about it. First, a little look at the history of the club. Pronounced Reims with a heavy French accent for the uncultured amongst us, the club, full name Stade de Reims, and City have long been overshadowed by bigger clubs in the region, such as PSG, Lille, Metz, and Auxerre. But the status quo is slowly beginning to change. Formed in 1931, Reims actually have a somewhat storied history, having won the division national title on no fewer than 6 occasions. However, their last triumph in the top division came all the way back in 1962. So it's safe to say fans of the club have been somewhat starved of success for some time now. The 50s and early 60s were undoubtedly the most successful period for the club, as they added to their 6 league titles with 2 Coupe de France triumphs. During those heady days, Reims actually managed to reach the European Cup final on 2 separate occasions, falling into the mighty Real Madrid both times, echoing Liverpool in the modern age. The mid-60s brought with them a turbulent time for the club, before they faced the ignominy of relegation to the 2nd tier in 1968. Of course, they would make it back to the top flight, but would rarely trouble the big boys in the division again. Until now. So, have Reims come to the fore in recent years? Well, it's no secret that French academies are some of the best in Europe. Free from the pressures of English Premier League and the often circus-like conditions which follow players of the clubs, youth in France is given the chance to flourish. And due to the respective lack of investment French clubs have had to deal with in relation to their English counterparts, they will often look to their youth teams when a first-team player leaves, as opposed to bringing in a more established first-team player. As we know, League One doesn't have the more established stars of their competitor leagues in Spain, Italy, and England, apart from the big 3 at PSG. So, the gap between first-team players and standout youth players isn't as big as it might be in those other countries, especially England. And nowhere is this better epitomised than at Reims. With one of the more modern training facilities in the French league, Reims are not scared to promote from within their own ranks. Youngsters such as Alexis Flips, Ilan Kebel, Nathaniel Mbuku, Dion Lopy, and El Bilal Touré have all spent time in the now fabled Reims youth system. And for teams with limited budgets, this avenue represents one of the best chances of developing and then profiting from young players. Of course, Reims will occasionally bring in young players themselves and further develop them at the club. Wout Faes was signed in the summer of 2020, who went on to make 73 appearances for the club. He was sold onto Leicester City in the English Premier League for £15 million last summer. Although Reims signed him for an undisclosed fee, you can bet your bottom dollar it was nowhere near the amount Leicester parted with for his services. This model of churning out young talent is working well for Reims right now, and it could be a model which nets them plenty more in the future. So, is this the plan moving forward? It appears to be, yes. Reims are a club who need to profit from any talent they produce. They probably aren't going to challenge with the big boys of League One in the long term, so the best chance to have to survive and even prosper is to act as a feeder club to the bigger, more established clubs around France and Europe. As we mentioned, they have already cashed in on Faes. And with 20-year-old striker Hugo Ekitike out on loan at Paris Saint-Germain, it seems he too could be the next Reims product to command a big fee. Reims aren't the only club employing this model. For years, French teams have provided talent for the bigger clubs around Europe. You will probably remember that Monaco team of 2017 who got all the way to the semi-finals of the Champions League. The pre-season directly after that, the team were decimated as the bigger European teams circled. Fabinho was sold to Liverpool, Bernardo Silva and Benjamin Mendy to Manchester City, and Tiamui Bakayoko to Chelsea. Of course, the pick of the bunch was Kylian Mbappe, who was shipped out to PSG. This model is not a new one, but it does allow for less fashionable teams such as Reims to compete by selling and rebuilding. The French FA are also behind this way of doing things. Just last year, they moved to increase the length of first professional contracts for young players from 3 years to 5 years. This was designed to help clubs like Reims, who were growing tired of developing players then letting them go for less than what they would be worth a season or 2 later. Or even worse, letting them go for free after 3 seasons. Next up, we're discussing some of the factors. Anyone who knows anything about football will understand that to attain even a modicum of success, there needs to be a certain amount of stability. I mean, just look at what's going on next door in La Liga with Valencia. They've had 16 managers in 9 years, and as such are threatened with the very real possibility of relegation. The same thing is happening in England with Everton. It is the complete opposite of Reims. When they were promoted back in the 2017-18 season, they kept a hold of the manager who got them to the party in the first place, David Guillon, and for the next 3 years, it was all well in Reims. In his first 2 seasons, Guillon led them to the top half finishes of 5th and 8th. His third season wasn't quite as impressive as he finished 14th. But when we put into perspective the magnitude of what he was doing with the limited resources he had, 14th place was mightily impressive in the grand scheme of things. Guillon then signed a new deal, with everyone around French football expecting that particular marriage to go on indefinitely. But shortly after, he dropped the bombshell that he would be leaving, much to the shock of everyone around the club. In came Oscar Garcia for a little more than a season, but he was relieved of his duties earlier this season with Reims languishing in 15th place. So, what happened next? Glad you asked. Turns out it was one of the more left-field appointments throughout European football over the past few years. Any self-respecting football fan will have wasted plenty of hours in their parents' spare room as a teenager, frantically trying to bring in that signing which would change their club's football manager fortunes for the season to come. Few will have actually let the legendary game influence their career path, however. That is, unless you happen to be Reims' trailblazing 30-year-old English boss, Will Still, who is doing big things with the small, provincial club in northeastern France. When Garcia left in October 2022, Still was promoted from assistant manager to the big job, initially in caretaker capacity. And it's safe to say, he impressed. After 5 games unbeaten, Still was handed the full-time gig, making him the youngest manager in Europe's top 5 divisions at just 30 years old. The funny thing is, he doesn't even hold a UEFA Pro license, and for every game he manages, Reims are fined €25,000. But who exactly is Will Still? Still is a person who embodies perfectly Reims' philosophy of giving youth a chance. Admittedly, this usually comes on the field and not in the dugout. As I previously mentioned, Still has referenced his love of Football Manager in the past and how it influenced his foray into football coaching. As a youngster, he would play the game obsessively, which actually ended up affecting his decision to move to England to study to become a coach. Still was born in Belgium to English parents, so moving to England as a 17-year-old didn't particularly faze him as he already knew the language. During his time in northwest England, he spent time at Preston North End as a youth assistant. He then made his way back to Belgium, working at various clubs in the role of video analyst. In 2018, Still was given the opportunity as an assistant at Beerschot, before moving to Reims as Garcia's assistant, which ultimately landed him the big job when Garcia was shown the door. And he has grabbed the opportunity with both hands. Reims are currently in the top half, well clear of relegation, and it's hard to discount the impact Still has made. I mean, he started his managerial career 14 games unbeaten, before Reims lost to Toulouse in the Coupe de France. His unbeaten run in the league is still intact at the time of writing, which has seen him set a new League One record of 17 matches without defeat at the start of his tenure. In the 21st century, only one other man has bettered this record in Europe's top 5 leagues, Tito Vilanova at Barcelona, with 18 unbeaten in 2012-2013. Reims have a real gem in the form of Will Still, and if they can keep hold of him, and heaven knows, maybe even provide him with a bit of spending money, we could be talking about Reims dining at the top table of European football next season. Wouldn't that be something? As usual, thanks for stopping by today, and remember to tune in again next time when we'll be discussing loads more fun bits and pieces. And don't forget to like and share today's video, whilst also subscribing to our channel so you don't miss out on more great content. Bye guys.